When you travel by airplane, there are several unknowns. You may not know if you're going to be seated in a window or an aisle, or that most uncomfortable position right in between the two. You may be unsure if you'll make your connecting flight, depending on delays and cancellations. You might not know if you'll be offered peanuts or pretzels. And will you be so lucky as to actually find your baggage on that conveyor belt when you get where you're going? Who knows? But one thing is for sure. If you can count on nothing else where air travel is concerned, you can bet that you will hear the flight attendants give the safety instruction speech on every flight, without exception, without fail. And you know the drill. No smoking, especially in the bathrooms. That's a federal offense. Keep your seatbelt on when you're sitting down. Don't get up till the seatbelt light is turned off. Keep carry-on items stowed when not in use. Set electronic devices to airplane mode or turn them off. And then that list of information you hope you will never need. How to locate the closest emergency exit. How to use your seat cushion as a flotation device, which is actually not comforting information to have. And what to do if oxygen masks suddenly fall from the ceiling due to a loss of cabin pressure. Straighten the tube so air can flow. Place mask over nose and mouth, securing with the straps. Adjust the straps until it fits properly, and always, always put your own mask on before assisting others. It is that last bit of instruction that I find to be the most curious. Secure your own oxygen mask before helping others, even if you are traveling with your own small child, or if you're seated next to someone who is mobility compromised. So even if you're traveling with a child or seated next to someone who needs assistance, you are still to put on your own oxygen mask in the event of a loss of cabin pressure. The airlines know that if one does not attend to their own oxygen needs first, they run the risk of suffering from hypoxia, a loss of oxygen to the brain, which will render one unable to be of any use to anyone, including themselves, including children, including others who may need assistance, thereby causing more harm than good. Yes, the airlines, while still having so much to figure out about being efficient airlines, have managed to figure out something fairly important, something pretty big that we all need to be reminded of. We are much more useful and capable when we first attend to ourselves. This section of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount is full of similar instruction. Take care of yourself first, because only then will you be able to help someone else. Today's passage opened with the directive, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged." This doesn't mean so much don't ever judge anything. Complicity in the face of sin and brokenness and injustice is not helpful and not the way of God's kingdom. Remaining complicit can enable harmful behavior or values and can be a way of acquiescing to the dominant power. But neither is it helpful to sit and judge and condemn others with no self-examination. And that, I believe, is a truer understanding of Christ's instruction. We should take time to first recognize our own contributions to sinfulness, our own participation in the brokenness of the world, our own need for reconciliation. Because by doing that, we are in a better position to help address it, and certainly in a better position to judge more lovingly than when coming at someone from a position of understanding ourselves as flawless while pointing a finger at someone else to say, here's what you have done wrong. And you certainly stand a greater chance of being heard. Attend to yourself and then to others. Your own oxygen mask first. Jesus continues in his sermon when he says, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own? Take the plank out of your own eye first, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your neighbor's eye. We all have blind spots. We see things from our own perspectives. We have to. We can't see everything from every viewpoint. And I think that's part of God's brilliant design in humanity, a diversity of perspectives. It's even modeled in Scripture, with 4 Gospels telling the same story in 4 ways. It's good that we have varying perspectives, but we can try to have some awareness of how we see the world. A few years ago, in the midst of going through all that is required for ordination in the United Church of Christ, which is my denomination, I spent 3 days in Columbus, Ohio for a series, an in-depth series of personality and psychological tests. I answered approximately a gazillion questions and then spent time with a team of ministers and mental health professionals who interpreted and talked through my results, something that is required of every UCC minister and probably other denominations too. I looked up the paperwork again in preparation for this sermon, and specifically over the course of 3 days, I took and processed the results of the self-care and wellness assessment, the sentence completion assessment, the career role identification profile, the autobiographical questionnaire, the Wagner Enneagram Personality Style Scale, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, also known as the MMPI, and perhaps the most familiar, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. Before I go any further, let me just clarify that I support this practice. Ministers should go through extensive personality and psychological testing. We are typically people who are trusted. We are typically people who are in places of authority. In fact, I think that this practice should be much broader and wider to include perhaps police chiefs and CEOs and leaders of all countries here and across the world. These tests, for most of us, do not reveal psychopathy, but rather articulate things that we've probably always known about ourselves that have not yet been spelled out for us. And in doing so, show us that others approach things differently and that that's okay. For example, one of the Myers-Briggs scales shows that I am intuitive. I lean into being future-focused, one who sees possibilities, who is inventive and imaginative and deep and abstract and idealistic. I'm just naming the good stuff. The other side of that scale is someone who relies more on their senses than their intuition. That person is concrete and lives in the present and is aware of their surroundings and is practical and reacts to their senses and concrete facts. Also helpful. I like to think that my intuition is valuable, but it does cause me to interpret the world from a certain perspective. I might miss something that a sensing person would notice, and vice versa. The world needs Myers-Briggs type ENFPs like me, and INTJs, and ESFPs, and every other combination of those 4 letters. But we get into trouble when we think that our approach is the only way to approach something. We get much further when we recognize that we have blind spots too. Attend to yourself and then to others. Your own oxygen mask first. This portion of the Sermon on the Mount is best known for verse 12. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. This simple, beautiful phrase, which we refer to commonly as the Golden Rule, is not unique to Christianity. It's unique to Christianity in that it's Jesus that says it in our scriptures, but across the world, numerous religions and cultures also lift up a similar rule of reciprocity. Treat others the way you would like to be treated. It makes sense, and for most of us can become kind of a moral checkpoint, a balance to our behavior. But for others, it is not so simple to expect kindness or even to think one is deserving of it. Most of you know that I spent many years in youth ministry here. It is hard and rewarding work. In fact, next time you see Joe Kennedy, who is currently on a ski trip with 16 middle and high school students, give him a pat on the back, because it's work that isn't for everyone, and he is good at it. One of the observations I made over the years was that kids who seemed the toughest, whose behavior was the least rewarded and considered the least desirable, were the kids who were the most vulnerable and the most hurting. We learn over the years, as we grow older, what is acceptable in public. And we tend, no matter how we feel, to conform to those expectations. But to generalize, tweens and teens haven't learned that yet, or at least they haven't mastered the art of acting like everything is okay. They are more impulsive. They are more raw. They are less filtered. We like to call it unable to control their emotions, but perhaps it is more accurate to say less willing to conform to society's rules that mask their actual feelings. Simply put, they tend to be more authentic. I will not pretend to be some kind of behavioral scientist. I am not. But I can convey what I have observed. And what I've observed is that sometimes when people treat others in a way that we have categorized as bad or unkind, it's because those people who are behaving that way believe that that is also how they deserve to be treated. In other words, they are following the golden rule, so to speak, but they have a hurting understanding of self. I would see students with a history of being unaccepted by their peers lash out first. It's easier to push people away first than risk being rejected again. I have seen young people whose concept of self-worth has been damaged in some way through bullying or lack of support or not fitting in, that they were the ones most likely to lash out and seemingly treat others unkindly. One can imagine that in cases of more serious dysfunction, verbal or physical abuse or neglect, the very identity of someone, particularly a young person, may be reduced. Their very sense of self-worth becoming unstable or imperceptible. And in the rare and awful case when a person has known violence, they may behave violently, not knowing another way, not knowing they deserve and are capable of better. We don't expect someone without oxygen to breathe. We can't expect someone who does not know kindness to be kind. The golden rule is beautiful in its simplicity. Treat others as you wish to be treated. But the golden rule can become tarnished when one either cannot accept or does not know that they are fearfully and wonderfully made by a God who knows and loves them. The golden rule assumes that each person knows that they hold inherent value, and each person does hold inherent value. When Christ returns and the world is made right, all will know. But for now, the brokenness of this world has kept that truth from some. The psalmist in Psalm 139, which Jessalyn read beautifully, teaches us that God created us, our inmost being. God is with us when we wake and when we sleep, when we are in the light or in the dark. No matter how we try to hide ourselves, God still sees us as God-created beings bearing God's own image. The psalmist teaches us that every one of us, every one of you, are fearfully and wonderfully made. And if you are one who can hear those words, accept them, and rejoice in them, then you can and likely do live out the golden rule. You have your oxygen mask firmly affixed in place, so to speak. And now it's your turn to assist other passengers. Go and treat others as fearfully and wonderfully made creations of God who, whether they can hear it or not right now, are made in God's image too. Flight attendants teach us, affix your own oxygen mask before assisting others. That's how to be helpful. More importantly, Jesus reminds us, before you make a judgment, first acknowledge where you can improve. Before you call someone out on their blind spots, first acknowledge your own. And above all else, treat one another as you want to be treated, even if the person you're treating with dignity and love does not know or cannot accept that they deserve such kindness. Friends, each of you are fearfully and wonderfully made by God. Know you are valued. Then go into the world, showing that to others in the way that you worship and love and live. Amen.